Hi, I'm Rachel Salzberg, a mindset and leadership coach and founder of the movement and podcast series, The Riesel Revolution. I believe that every person has the potential to create a story of transformation about their life that's so great it serves as an inspiration and model to our families, our communities, and our organizations. This podcast series serves as a platform for people to have a voice, and it serves as an inspiration for you to write your story. It's my mission through this podcast series to help people to realize their potential by resouling and connecting with themselves, and then resurging with confidence and empowered to share their gifts and purpose with the world. Please join the movement by listening to the Riesel Revolution. Hi everyone, welcome on this beautiful, beautiful first day of fall. We're so lucky in Seattle to have a sunny day here, and I'm truly, truly honored to be here to talk with James Pratt, who is one of my most favorite coaches, human beings, leaders in this world, who really has been inspiring for me in shaping the Riesel Revolution. And he and I value each other's philosophies, and we have very similar purposes in this life to give people a platform and a voice to create consciousness in this world, and really want to help people share their stories to inspire others so that people can develop resilience and face adversity to keep going, and we can all support each other in doing so. And so I was lucky enough to be interviewed by James for the Silent Superhero podcast series that he has developed, which is really around helping create awareness around mental health, especially in a corporate setting. And I know through my dark days, this interview really helped spark me to be able to share, find my voice, share my voice, and also create awareness for others who struggle with anxiety and depression. And I'm grateful to be here with James because I want to hear his story, and I want everybody in the world to hear his story. And so, James, I would love for you to kind of introduce yourself to the world and kind of tell people who you are, what you do, why you do what you do.
And I'll try and keep it short. I think I've built my life around following my instincts and having the courage to sort of dive in when my instinct says go over there. And so if you look at me from a career perspective, I've done all sorts of kind of disparate things. Like I've been like an entrepreneur and a software engineer and a product manager, and I've led HR teams, and now I'm a coach. So all these kind of odd things, but it's because on the journey I kind of follow where where I want to go. So as I said, right now I'm a coach. As you said, I host the Silent Superheroes podcast, and this is such a good opportunity for me because in that I talk to people about their stories, or I have them share their stories, like yourself. And I've been aware for a long time that sooner or later, kind of the camera figuratively needs to be pointed back at me, right? Like, what's your story, buddy, for, this podcast that you do? And so I was delighted to be invited to come share my story and have the camera pointed at me.
Why don't you start off by telling your story in terms of, what was your challenge? What was your adversity? What made you do the Silent Superheroes podcast in the first place?
So, grew up in what you would think of as a fairly typical white middle-class family in the UK. And, nothing seemed kind of out of the ordinary. The only thing that kind of would bug me is that sometimes I'd be able to move real kind of fast at schoolwork and stuff like that, and sometimes it comes so hard, and it's like, why can't I keep going at the same speed? And that actually followed me into my career and into my adult life. So kind of graduated high school, graduated college, and entered the workforce as an entrepreneur. Founded a company with friend from college. It was great. We built mobile software in 2000, it doesn't matter, early 2000s. Okay. And that went fine. The company got acquired by a bigger company. Then I'd met a lot of people at Microsoft and really thought they're smart and they're intelligent, and I want to go know what they know and learn how to be like them. And so ended up coming over in 2003 to the US, joined Microsoft, worked with a number of wonderful people there, some of whom you know. And I'd say life was pretty good. You know, like there was this constant upward trajectory in my life. Entrepreneur, a company gets bought, go to this bigger company, go work for this, prestige company like Microsoft, get promoted, keep climbing the ladder there. And I did that. I worked at Microsoft for 7 years until 2010. And things were going great, but a friend had gone to HTC, start a new group there. And so I went over to join HTC in 2010. And again, growing, going up the ladder, doing the things you should do. I was a director. I had a car I'd paid off. I had a house. I was married. I'd started a family. Like all those things that life and society tells you is what's necessary to be happy.
Yeah.
So it was a big surprise. 2012, July 18th, I woke up in Harborview Hospital here in Seattle, which is a hospital you may have some familiarity with. And I kind of woke up and I was wearing my soccer clothes from the night before. And I was kind of lying there and I kind of had this drip in my arm down here. I was a bit puzzled. I was like, well, I'm this successful guy. Like, why am I waking up in hospital? Like, what's happened? And it was obvious it was the ER. And then I started to get these memories of, I'd gone out and I'd played soccer and had a few drinks, and I'd come home and I had an argument with Amy, and then I had some more drinks, and then I'd gone to a nearby bar and had some more drinks there. And then I started getting these vague memories of like people in my house I didn't know, and then like being strapped to a gurney, and then being put in an ambulance, and like arriving in the hospital. In those hospital dramas, you have that thing where you see the lights like whipping above the patient when they're getting wheeled into the hospital. Like I remember that, and then nothing.
Wow.
So after a while, a member of the medical staff came by, and she asked me a question, and it was a question that just fundamentally changed the course of my life. She said, "Do you think you were trying to hurt yourself?" And I, with all my being, wanted to say no. Successful people, upcoming executives, yada, 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 they don't hurt themselves. They're strong and they're yada, yada, yada. And I just sat there and it was like, if you ever had that experience where you want to say something and like it just won't come. Like your voice won't work, your brain won't let it. And, I don't know how long it was. It felt like about 20 minutes. It was probably only like a minute or something, but eventually, after I'd sat on it for a while, I realized, well, yeah, I have been. And, in reality, if I hadn't woken up that next day, I don't think I'd have minded.
Wow.
Right? Like, I'd made an attempt, not a completely conscious attempt, but to drink myself to death. And actually, they told me that I had 0.35 blood alcohol, which is like more than 4 times the drink drive limit here in Washington. And that puts most people in a coma. What I didn't know at that time was I'd been using alcohol more and more and more. And so I'd built up a bigger and bigger and bigger tolerance. So I guess I'm grateful for that because it kept me alive. But it was a moment of realizing that something was fundamentally wrong. I remember I started crying and cried for an hour. I hadn't cried since I was 12 years old or something like that. And you realize that, okay, I got to figure out what's going on here. Because you have 2 choices in that situation. It's like you put the monster back in the box, or you say, okay, monster, like let's figure out what's going on here. So I was diagnosed with alcoholism. I went to see a chemical dependency counselor. She started, helping me understand that lifestyle that I thought was normal growing up was actually far from normal. Normal people didn't drink as much as I drank, and had done since I was a teenager. And that I had some pretty distorted views of the world. For example, as dear Holly, the chemical dependency counselor, helped me see, you can do things just for the fun of doing them. I thought you could only play soccer to win, right? So she just shifted my mindset. about things like that. And so life started getting better. I went to AA meetings. I think around that time I started meditating. I was like consuming self-help books at like an unhealthy rate, and things were good until they started getting really bad again. And by fall of 2014, I was on a business trip to Taiwan, working for HTC, and life had started going up again, like, more promotions, running a whole division now, all that kind of stuff. And at some point that I didn't notice, things started to slide again. I wasn't drinking, so I wasn't sliding with the drink, but my inner state, positivity about the world, just had started to seep away, to the point where 2014, I was working for HTC, and I'd been on an extended business trip to Taiwan, which is where HTC is located. And I remember that these very dark thoughts had crept in again. And again, I didn't want to be here. But, I in theory, had it all, but didn't want to be here. And I spent something like 17 days every day thinking about, like, how should I kill myself?
Wow.
To the point where, while I was on that trip, I climbed to the top of the HTC's headquarters in Taipei.
Wow.
17 stories, 17-story building, and I stood there, sort of looking over and like thinking, shall I jump? Like, is now the time? Obviously, I didn't. But when I got back to the US, I was in a couples counseling appointment with Amy, my wife, and the counselor had asked me a question: do you believe that Amy loves you? We'd been together at that point, this was 2014-ish, so we'd been together for 17 years. So the very obvious answer to that question was, of course. And again, it wouldn't come. I couldn't say yes. I couldn't believe that somebody could love me. Which is a pretty dark place to be.
Yep.
And Richard, the counselor, I remember him leaning forward, and he was this, he was towards the end of his counseling career, not far away from retirement, seen it all, very kind of into his, mindfulness, and just kind of leaned in. He said, James, he said, you've been doing great. He said, you've been, you've been trying to deal with the alcohol problem, you've been going to AA meetings, you've been eating better, you're working in a relationship with Amy, you're meditating, you're exercising. Like, at the time, I was cycling literally everywhere. It had become absurd. He said, but maybe there's something we're missing. Maybe there's a piece of the jigsaw we haven't found yet. He said, if I can find you a good psychiatrist, will you just go talk to them and just see what else is going on? So again, I was in this position where it's kind of like, what other choice do I have? Like, I can continue to be miserable, not be able to believe my wife loves me, or I could go talk to this person, find stuff out. And I was resistant to the idea of mental illness at that point. Like, in my mind, it was, it's a weakness, made up, or whatever. So so he gave me a reference. I went to see Dr. Bartle. She interviewed me. She interviewed friends and family who knew me well. And I went back to her office and she said, James, you're bipolar. So suddenly a lot of things made sense. It made sense why I would have these very, very deep depressions.
Right.
It would make sense where I'd have these periods of like being super productive and being able to get tons of stuff done, like in school, and that followed me through my life. So that was kind of start of the second journey for me. The alcoholism really was a symptom of the bipolar disorder. So now there was this new thing to go learn about.
So you were diagnosed with bipolar in 2014.
Yeah.
And then, okay, how did you take that? What was your journey? What did you do?
Sure.
How did you communicate to your employers, or what did you choose to do? What was your journey from there?
Yeah, great question. First is learning how to live with it. So, I take medication. I actually take 2 medications now. How important sleep is to people with bipolar. Probably one of the reasons my depression had flared up so badly was I was going back and forth to Taiwan at least once a month,
Yeah.
shipping 16 hours in 16 hours time zone in each direction, right? So learning how to live with bipolar was kind of job number one. That's what got me to switch out of building products into building people and teams. So by 2015, I decided that I was kind of done building blah blah tech stuff and launched myself out on my own as a consultant. I don't even know what I was consulting in, but something around people. And so I was kind of on my own, didn't need to address the bipolar issue there in terms of telling someone. And then I happened to get a job 16, at a tech company that was looking for a VP of people. I mean, like lightning in HR. Who gives a job VP of people to somebody who has no HR experience? It's ludicrous. But in that job, I wasn't yet at the place I could talk about my bipolar broadly. I was still very much in the place that I told sort of my team, I was trying to create a transparent environment.
Yeah.
I would tell certain other executives, but I don't think I ever told, CEO or the chief of staff or a whole bunch of people. So that's something interesting happened. So I then got on this people-centric journey. I was in the HR world, and somebody who's kind of a HR hub in Seattle said to me, like, "Oh, I met this other person that you should meet. She's amazing. You'll hit it off. You're kindred spirits. I'll set up a meeting." And so she did, and I met this person, and I'm going to just call her Kay for the for her own privacy, and we hit it off. Amazing. Like, you have that soul connection with somebody. You can't really explain why, but you just connect. And we'd hang out and talk about all the self-work we were doing and the discoveries we were making, and very, very powerful experience. And then kind of as the summer came along, I was having a really tough time at work, and she helped me with that. I think this would have been 2017. And as summer turned to fall, things started to change a little bit. And she had a long journey with mental illness since she was a teenager. She dealt with eating disorders as well. And she wasn't quite as bright and peppy anymore, wasn't quite as energetic. We'd meet, sometimes for coffee, and she'd just have all somebody who loved to kind of dress, and then she'd have her sweatpants on, with stains all over them and stuff like that. And then she disappeared for a while, just didn't hear from her. We hadn't known each other that long. So it was well, maybe it's just we're not going to talk anymore. We'd known each other 6 or 8 months at that point. Then she came back, and it turned out she'd been in a psychiatric facility.
Wow.
Things had just got really bad, and she was trying to figure out the medication situation and how to deal with things. And we talked for 3 hours that day. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but you talk to somebody and you can hear so much pain. You'd say, "I just want to be me. I just want to be back to being me." And there's just no hope, in her voice, and she's lost and doesn't know what to do. And I didn't hear from her again. November 27th, 2017, she died by suicide.
Oh my God, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, tell me about it. And I know it sounds weird because we hadn't known each other that long.
Yeah.
But just that connection was so damn strong,
Yeah.
So, come her memorial was in the January, and it was a beautiful room up at the UW. She was a UW grad. And all our friends there, 200 people, maybe more, I don't know. It was a giant room filled with people. And for 2 hours, what we talked about was this beautiful, smart, funny, intelligent, kind person with all these plans and love to travel and just all that stuff. Story that we want to tell, right? But no one said depression. No one said suicide. And I was furious. how could you tell someone's life story and consciously omit half of it, the hardest half actually, the half that truly made her who she was? So I left. I was angry, stormed on me, my friends at family at University Village, and stormed down that big hill, and I was annoyed when I got to the Starbucks, and I just kind of resolved I had to do something.
Yeah.
Like, it was an injustice.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, like, we did not do justice to her story. As it happened, a couple of months earlier, I was doing a coaching class, and we were doing peer coaching, and my peer coach worked in HR at Boeing, in employee relations, which is like frontline HR, work with employees directly. And I was explaining to her how I was coming out of a high, bipolar high, I was going into a low, and I was exhausted. Because, then you're going to go back in the high, and then I'm going to go back in the low, and like, I will do this for the rest of my life, and I'm just sick of it. She's like, oh, I didn't know kind of really what bipolar was. I didn't really know how it worked, and like, that was kind of the experience, like, so interesting. I thought, hang on, you work in HR. You work in HR directly with people, and like, if someone in HR is going to an employee is going to go to anyone in HR to talk about bipolar or depression or anxiety, it will be you. And like, the best you've got is, I've never heard of anything about bipolar apart from the word bipolar. Like, that's not right. Yeah. So these two things happen to meet at the same time. And so those coming together created the podcast, Silent Superheroes, where I try and help people tell their journey with mental health and mental illness, how it's affected their life, and then often how it shows up in their work, right? And how is it being a challenge, and how is it being a benefit to them, to kind of just open people's eyes to, people who have a mental illness are not the people holding the signs by the freeway. They're not the guy walking down the street screaming at the clouds. They're not the people locked up in psychiatric institutions with their hands bound. They're the people sat to your right at church, right? There are people sat opposite you at work. They're the person checking you out at the supermarket. 1 in 4 people this year will have some experience of mental illness, perhaps not a diagnosed mental illness, but some serious problem with their mental health. This year, 2020, because it's been this whole COVID thing, almost certainly a lot more than that, like probably double, I don't know, right? But people with mental illness are everywhere. We're just not talking about it. And so by sharing these stories, my hope is that I can humanize mental illness and just show real, normal people living everyday lives who also have an illness that they're dealing with.
I love the name Silent Superheroes, because what you've just described is giving people a voice for everybody to be a human being, and permission to be on the same playing field and to not feel alone. And that what you've just described, where people weren't talking about mental health and mental illness in the workplace, and it's the person next to you. And so how can people find their voice, and be a part of Silent Superheroes, and where can they go to listen to learn more about not only themselves but also how to help others who go through this?
Those are all excellent questions. First, silentsuperheroes.com is their website, so you can go there. Search Silent Superheroes on any podcasting platform, give or take, iTunes, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, whatever it might be, and you should find Silent Superheroes there, even on YouTube now. How could you get involved? You can email info@silentsuperheroes.com if you've got a story you want to tell. I'd love to talk to you about that. And you can, all the social media, facebook.com/Silent Superheroes, at Silent Super H on Twitter, at Silent Superheroes on Instagram. Like, basically look Silent Superheroes, that will get you get you there in most places.
Please reach out to me if you have a story to share. We'd love to hear from you and how you created change in yourself and developed resilience, purpose, and confidence. You can inspire others to resoul, resurge, to shine, and thrive. You can reach out to me at rachel@facetscoaching.com or go to theresoulrevolution.com. You can also subscribe to The Resoul Revolution on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube to hear more interviews with real people and real stories of resurgence. By listening, you're contributing to the movement, The Resoul Revolution.